Alright guys, today we're going to be looking at section 7.3, modeling with quadratic equations. So we're moving on from linear equations to quadratic. So a quadratic equation on this page, we're going to do a lot of highlighting. So a quadratic equation is an equation of degree 2, and it's written in the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Now, what that means is you're going to have a square term, you're going to have a linear term, which is a plain x term, and you're going to have a constant term. Okay, and the a, b, and c are just the coefficients on that. So this could be an example of a quadratic. This could be an example of a quadratic. No big thing here. Okay, so solutions to quadratic equations will be ordered pairs of numbers, just like they were for linear. So example 1, it asks, determine whether each ordered pair is a solution for the quadratic equation 2x squared minus 3x plus 5. So this is my x, this is my y. So I'm going to plug in 25 for y, and then I'm going to plug in 4 everywhere I see an x. So I'm going to plug in a 4 here, I'm going to plug in a 4 here, and then I have plus 5. Okay, so let's do order of operations. So 4 squared is 16. Then we can do our multiplications. So this is 32 minus 12 plus 5. So that's going to be 20 plus 5 is 25. And that's what we wanted to get. So 425 is a solution. I apologize for the mower. Okay, so that's the first one. Here's the second one. So we have 2 equals 2 times 1 squared minus 3 times 1 plus 5. Let's see if this is a solution. So 1 squared is 1. Then we can do our multiplications here. So this is 2 minus 3, which is negative 1, plus 5, which is 4. 4 is not equal to the 2 that I wanted. So 1, 2 is not a solution. Okay. All right. Now let's look at a few more things to highlight here. So plot all the solutions of a quadratic equation. We get a graph. So a quadratic equation graph is a figure called a parabola. Okay. If a is positive, so the number on the square term is positive, the graph opens up. If a is negative, the parabola opens down. Okay, and so here's some examples of that. Okay, if a parabola is opening up, the lowest point on the parabola is called the vertex. Similarly, if a parabola is opening down, the highest point is called the vertex. So I think a better definition of the vertex is where the parabola changes directions. Okay, so where it goes from going down to going up and vice versa. Okay, so this is if a was positive, this is what the graph will look like. If a is negative, this is what the graph will look like. Okay. Now, to find the vertex of the graph from this equation, you use this formula first. You do the opposite of what the b is divided by 2a, and that's your x value. Then plug this value in for x in the original equation to find y. It's supposed to say to find, not to for. To find. Okay. All right. Moving on. Quadratic formula. Okay, if you're solving a quadratic formula, trying to find the solutions of a quadratic formula, you're going to use the formula. And I don't like it when they separate it because that's not the way you learned it. So to find the solutions, you're going to go the opposite of b plus or minus, and see they separate it into two different equations. The square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so let's do a problem. X squared plus 5x minus 84 equals 0. Okay, so let's identify our parts first. So the a value is the one that's on the square term, and that's an understood 1. B is what's on the x term. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the second thing, it's what's on the x term. So make sure you find your pieces and make sure they're in order. And then C is negative 84. So let's plug it in. And I like to use parentheses here so that way we don't mess up on any signs. So it's the opposite of whatever B is. So the opposite of 5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared. Then you have a subtraction sign and a 4 and a 1 and a negative 84. All over the 2 and then the 1 in the parentheses. Okay, this is the way that I teach you how to do quadratic formula because I feel like people make so many mistakes with quadratic formula. Don't just start typing stuff into your calculator. Okay, do a little bit of it on your own. So 5 squared is 25. Okay, now you can touch your calculator. The opposite of 5 is negative 5. So you can do those two things on your own. Also, you can do the bottom on your own. Then I want you to type in what you see here. You see a negative 4 times 1 times negative 84. That's what you see. Okay? And you're going to get a positive 336. Okay? And if you add 25 plus 336 together, you get 361. And if you do that, you're not going to make so many mistakes. Then check. Always check to see if this is a perfect square. So square root of 361 is 19. So this is negative 5 plus or minus 19 over 2. Remember that this breaks into two pieces. This is negative 5 plus 19 over 2 and negative 5 minus 19 over 2. So this is going to be 14 over 2, which is 7. And this is negative 24 over 2, which is negative 12. Okay? And those are your two answers. I can put a little and symbol in between that. That doesn't mean that's your X and Y. That's where your where you're going to hit your X-axis. So it hits X-axis at 7 and negative 12. That's what that means. Okay? All right. Let's see. Let's go to example 2. Assume that a producer knows that the demand for a live concert by a popular artist on DVD can be modeled by this equation given. Here, N is the number of weeks since the introduction of the DVD, and S is the number of thousands of DVDs sold in weekend. Okay? So, if you wanted to, you could change this into Y equals negative 3x squared plus 169x. Now remember, okay, that it's usually got a plain number. If it doesn't have one, it's a 0. Okay, so you can write it like that just to have it standard. When do we expect the sales for the DVD to peak? So here they're wanting the vertex. So remember, we do X equals the opposite of B over 2A. And in this problem, A is negative 13, B is 169, and C is 0. So we're going to do the opposite of 169 over 2 times negative 13. I'm sorry, I'm fussing at my dog. Finley K, lay down. So this is negative 169 over negative 26. Okay? And this gives me 6.5. Now remember what I told you in the beginning with the vertex. You plug in the number you just found everywhere you see an X. Okay? So this is negative 13. 6.5 squared is 42.25. I'm just going to leave that 0 off. So when I multiply, I get negative 549.25. And when I multiply here, I get 1098.5. When I combine those, I get 549.25. So what that means is we expect sales to peak at 6.5 weeks. With, and it didn't ask me, so I can put this in parentheses, with 549.25 thousand DVDs. Okay? Now, after sales have peaked, when does this model predict that sales will sink below 100,000 copies per week? So this is going to go in for our Y. okay? But remember, we have to take off the thousands. So it's really 100 that we're going to be plugging in. So we have 100 equals negative 13n squared plus 169n. Now, we can bring this over and solve it using quadratic formula. So we have negative 13n squared plus 169n minus 100. And if you wanted to put the plus 0 there to begin with, you can. Okay, but when you move it over, it's going to be the minus 100. All right, so now we're going to plug in this for A, this for B, this for C. Remember our formula. The opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared negative 4AC over 2A. Okay, so we're going to do the opposite of 169 plus or minus square root of 169 squared. Then we have a negative 4 times a negative 13 times negative 100 over 2 times negative 13. Okay, so this is going to be a negative 169 plus or minus. When I square 169, I get 28,561. When I multiply the negative 4, the negative 13, and the negative 100, I get negative 5,200. All over negative 26. So this gives me negative 169 plus or minus the square root of 23,361 over negative 26. Now remember, this breaks it into two pieces. Negative 169 plus the square root of 23,361 divided by negative 26. And if you type that into your calculator, you're going to get 0.62. And negative 169 minus the square root of 23,361 divided by negative 26. And that's going to give you 12.38. Well, look at when they peaked. This number is before it peaked. So no, it's not that number. So it's going to hit 100. So that's when it hits 100 the first time, because remember you have your parabola. So it hits 100 the first time in a little over half a week. So it's going to come down to 100,000 at 12.38 weeks, or almost 13 weeks. Okay? Alrighty, let's see. I think that's all we're going to do on that. Now let's put all of this together. Okay? So, first question. Does this graph open up or down? Okay? So let's look at A. A is positive because it's a positive 1. So it opens up. Okay? And if you want to, you can go ahead and identify that A is 1, B is -4, and C is -12. Okay? B, what's the vertex? So remember, we do this formula to find X. So X is the opposite of B over 2 times A. So this is 4 over 2, which is 2. Then we plug it into our original equation. Everywhere we see X, because we found that X is 2. So this is going to be 4. Then we have -8 right here for multiplication. 4 minus 8 minus 12 is -16. So our vertex is 2, -16. Okay? C. What's the x-intercepts? And to find the x-intercepts, you do quadratic formula. Okay, we're going to do quadratic formula. So remember, our quadratic formula is the opposite of b plus or minus b squared -4ac over 2a. So this is going to be the opposite of -4 plus or minus the square root of -4 squared, then -4 times 1 times -12, all over 2 times 1. So this gives me 4 plus or minus 16 plus 48 over 2, which is 4 plus or minus the square root of 64 over 2, which is 4 plus or minus 8 over 2. Please remember that this breaks down into 4 plus 8 over 2 and 4 minus 8 over 2. Okay, so this is going to be 12 over 2, which is 6, and -4 over 2, which is -2. So our x-intercepts are 6, 0, because remember, x-intercepts is where it hits the x-axis, and -2, 0. Okay? Now, D, what's your y-intercepts? So for y-intercepts, remember, for y-intercepts, we let the x equal 0. So we have y equals 0 squared minus 4 times 0 minus 12. So that's y equals -12. So our y-intercepts is simply 0, 12. Then part E says sketch the graph. Okay? So it asks you to sketch the graph. So our vertex is all the way down at -6 to -16. So give me just a minute. We're going to draw. Not going to need much positive space up here. Okay. All right. So let's do our vertex first. So it's 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So our vertex was a purple. We used purple there, so I'm going to use purple here. Oops. Right there. That's my vertex. Then my x-intercepts. Sorry, my dryer cut off, so the dog lets me know that. Is 6, 0. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And -2, 0. Our y-intercept, that was 16, 15, 14, 13, 12. 0, -12. Okay? So now we need, remember this is where it's going to change directions. Not the greatest drawer, but that would be something similar to what I would need. Okay? And that would be a sketch. Alright, guys. That's all I have. Feel free to watch the video as much as you need, and if you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks. Bye.